Hello guys, welcome back. Now, to finish up our authentication module, let's give the users the ability to sign up with their social media accounts. Let's go to our authentication service, and here we're gonna create our social login function. It will be a private method, and we're gonna pass a provider. In this social login, we're gonna return a function from the Firebase SDK. We have these two options in here, signing with pop-up and with redirect. You can choose any of that for your app. It will depend on your app workflow. And here we're gonna use that provider. And this function will return the user's credential if successful. So let's catch it, and then we're gonna use the credentials and we're gonna pass it through our update user data function. Credential.user. Let's also catch any error. So now that that's done, we're going to pass the provider in here. And for that, we're going to create a function for every provider Firebase supports. We're going to start with Google. Okay. Let's create a provider. And we're going to do new Firebase. Auth. And here we have Google provider. Then we will return this.social login, and we're gonna pass the provider. So now let's copy it and change for the rest of the providers. We have GitHub, Twitter, Facebook. So now we can create some buttons. Back in our signing component, just below the button here, let's add a few more buttons. I've created this beforehand. You can just pause the video and copy it. And here I'm calling it straight from the auth service. I haven't created a method in here like I did with the sign in to call the email from the auth service, but I'm calling straight from the auth service. And the reason I can do that is because I set auth service to public in here. And if I change it to private, now we've got an error. It's not a member of the component. Before we enabled Google login on our Firebase SDK. Now let me show you how can you enable and set up Twitter. Back in the Firebase console, go on authentications. Here in the sign-in method, we're going to need an API and a secret key in here. For Google, we already have it because Firebase belongs to Google. So in here we can go on learn more, and this is the Firebase documentation. You're going to scroll down here and the federated identity provider. Let's click on Twitter for web. And here there's the information on how to create the Twitter button, which we just did. You can also pass a language code. It's always good to read the documentation. You can find really neat stuff to use. So let's get to it. Twitter, before you begin, let's quickly here in Twitter app config. Here I'm already logged in with my account. You need a Twitter account, of course. You can create a new app, give it a name, ngFire, and the website you can get from the project based in here. This is the website. Now for the callback URL, you can copy this one in here. After we click in the button, it will ask Twitter for permission, and then if it's successful, it's gonna return to this page, which is provided by Firebase, and we will handle the process. So create your application here. Good, now we can get access keys and token. Here you have the consumer key, which is the API key here. Just click enable and paste. and you have a secret API key, which is secret. You shouldn't be showing to anyone. And that's done. So now let's go and try in our app. Just refresh it. Click on Twitter. You go to Twitter, ngFire, the address, and a description, which you added in there before. So we authorize the app. It returns us to the sign in, but that's because we were there before. We need to do something about it. After, we're going to talk about the router guards, which will then look if a user is authenticated, and it's going to redirect them out of this page. Let's pull up the developer tools with Ctrl+Shift+I, and let's check the Firebase user object. It's not verified. Email is null. Remember I mentioned about the null or not? If you didn't put the null, would be an error here in the save the user's data, email or null. But that only applies for Twitter. And then we have our profile picture that came from Twitter and some provider data. And that's how we create. Here, if you click on Google, it's going to sign in with Google. Back in our Firebase console, if you go on authentication, and you can see the provider is now Twitter here for the new user, and its identifier here is null because we don't have an email. And if you check in our database, our data didn't get saved. And the reason is that signing with redirect won't call our function after it returns to our page. We should put our update user data somewhere else. If you use the sign in with pop-up, it should work properly. Let's try it now. Now let's click again. Click. Now it's gonna pop up a window. It's done. You can check in here. We have it. All the information in our app. Twitter is back in there. And here it's being added to our new user. Now to finish the authentication module, let's create some utility methods in here that is going to help us out with our app in the future. First, we're going to add auth state so we can check if the user is authenticated or not. Auth state, which will default to null. And here in the constructor, we're gonna call the AngularFire auth and check the auth state. We're gonna subscribe to the data, and then we will pass the data to the auth state that we created. Close data. We can leave it in the same line, so we don't need to use the curly braces. Now, let's create some methods. Get authenticated. This is gonna be a boolean. Either is authenticated or not. Here we're gonna check if the auth state is null or not. So this is gonna return true if there is auth state data. Now let's get the current user ID, which we're gonna use it a lot in this app. And that's the string. Here we're going to check if there is a current user authenticated. And if there is, we're gonna return the user ID. And if not, it's gonna be null. So now let's recap. The Firebase auth state will return some data if it's true. So we're gonna subscribe to that data and you're gonna pass it to the auth state in here. Then we're going to use the data on the authenticated. If there is any data in it, we will return true in the authenticated. If not, we return null. And to get the current user ID, we will check if there is a user authenticated. And if there is, that means there is some data. So we're gonna get the UID or if the user is not authenticated, we return null. Now let's save our work to Git. If you use Git branch, Git status. So we did a lot of work on this module. So let's say add everything, git add, git commit -m, give a message, add app authentication, and commit. I hope you enjoyed this module, and next we will create a user profile to display all the data we've saved.